Hello, welcome to the, hold on a second, Space Education and Strategic Applications Conference 2022, 50 years from the moon and the future of commercial government and military space exploration. We have one presenter with us right now, Joshua Ambrosius. He will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and answer. So Joshua, you're perhaps better at introducing yourself than I am at introducing you. So anything that you would like to highlight in introducing yourself?
Okay, one moment here. Trying to make sure I have the slides ready.
While you're doing that, I'll read your official bio. It's quite extensive, so this will give you plenty of time to work on your slides.
They froze up on me, so I closed out and pulled them back up, but should be good now.
I understand completely. I prefer working off my iPhone for that reason, which is interesting. And I just use a Chromebook. Also, it's a lot lighter. But let me read your bio, and then this will give you some time to get your slides uploaded and everything. Joshua Ambrosius is an associate professor of political science and is the director of the Master of Public Administration program at the University of Dayton. He holds a PhD from the University of Louisville and a Master of Public Policy from the Johns Hopkins University. His space-related scholarship emphasizes public opinion on space exploration, religion in space, race in space, and the social science of space exploration. This work has appeared in the journal Space Policy, Separation of Church and Space, Religious Influences on Public Support for U.S. Space Policy, and Religions, Re-examining the Separation of Church and Space, Evangelical Protestant Support for Space Exploration in the Trump-Pence Age, as well as the co-authored volume, Touching the Face of the Cosmos on the Intersection of Space Travel and Religion, Our Cosmic Future, How Religion Might Shape It. He teaches graduate coursework on public policy, public budgeting, research methods, and statistics, and since 2017, an innovative interdisciplinary undergraduate course on space policy entitled Space Exploration Toward a Spacefaring Society. Outside of space studies, his other current work explores community-based online social networking, the generation of social capital online, political trust in the present political and pandemic environment, and sustainability beliefs and behaviors on a university campus. He teaches graduate coursework on public policy, public budgeting, research methods, and statistics. And since 2017, an innovative interdisciplinary undergraduate course on space policy titled Space Exploration Toward a Spacefaring Society. Let's see, I think that's
perfect.
Okay, and yeah, reading your bio, it reminds me of reading about the bio of like St. Thomas Aquinas. I love the exploration of the cosmos, and from a religious perspective. So I've taught religious studies at American Military University for about the past 15 years. Although I also end up tutoring much more in the STEM area, so it's much more needed. But let me pass it off to you, and yeah, thank you everyone for everyone's patience with the slight technical glitches that we had.
Great. So I'm pulling up the slides now. Okay, so thank you, Rob, for that introduction. It was so good. It was almost like I wrote it myself. So I'm going to present on teaching space policy to undergraduate students through general education. And again, I am located at the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio. So I'm going to be including a case study of a course that I teach to undergraduates at UD. So this paper is one of several space-related projects that I worked on during my spring 2022 sabbatical. The paper is under review at a major space policy journal, and I'm currently working on the R&R, the revise and resubmit on that paper. So I would appreciate any questions, any feedback that could assist in revising the paper, but also because I'm currently teaching and will continue to teach for the foreseeable future my course on space policy. So any feedback related to the course specifically would be appreciated as well. Before I begin, I want to highlight a summary of the presentation. First, I'm going to argue that space education in the social sciences versus exclusively STEM fields is essential to our future in outer space. Second, that interdisciplinary general education courses on space policy have the potential to reach more diverse students, more so than single discipline or elective courses. Third, my case study of a thematic interdisciplinary course will demonstrate that learning outcomes of interest beyond space studies can be achieved while teaching about the space topic. And then finally, I'm going to recommend that space-oriented higher education faculty should consider adopting similar approaches to integrate space education into gen ed at the university level and ultimately reach broader student populations with an understanding of space policy. So I want to share with you as I begin a quote that I absolutely love. It is from an article titled, "Will Space Actually Be the Final Frontier of Humankind?" The piece is authored by Genta and Rycroft in 2006 in the journal Acta Astronautica. And I love this quote because it perfectly summarizes what I'm trying to get at with my course on space policy. So I'm just going to read part of it to you. Will space actually be the final frontier of humankind? The present generation can take its first faltering steps on the path towards a spacefaring civilization. And here's the kicker, but the outcome will depend on social, political, and economic issues rather than technological and scientific ones. So I actually highlight this in the final module of my space policy course. Students read the full piece, but in at least the online version of the course, I highlight this particular excerpt because it really hammers home what I'm trying to accomplish in this class, to argue that if space is the final frontier of humankind, if we are destined to be a spacefaring civilization, the outcome depends on social, political, and economic issues, rather than, I would add here, exclusively technological and scientific ones. And actually in my course, when I share this at the end in the module, I accompany it with a meme, and I love this. If I had a mic, I'd drop it. So just to hammer home that this is what the course is about. So to dive more into the highlights here. So again, if humankind's future lies in outer space, I would argue that education for space exploration must be a priority of colleges and universities. And like Genta and Rycroft highlight, this education must be beyond the fields of science, technology, engineering, and must encompass the social sciences, and we could go further, the humanities as well. This emphasis on the social science of space, on space policy, is meant not as a substitute, but rather as a complement to STEM education. There's actually little literature out there on the topic of space policy education in universities. I'm going to highlight a couple stellar pieces that I use in my work, but the two articles that I will argue are the clearest cases for space policy teaching have, in over 2.5 decades, only 6 citations in the literature. And that includes one of the papers citing the other paper. So So I am hoping to add to the literature on space policy education. Now, ultimately, am I arguing that colleges and universities should create a space policy 101 course to add alongside English 101 or Psych 101 or Intro to American Government? While I think a lot of attendees here at this conference would love universities to have space education as part of their gen ed curriculum required of all students, I think it's unlikely and probably ridiculous to even suggest, or would be treated as ridiculous by university administrators. Now, this might change, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future as we work towards becoming a spacefaring civilization with an ever larger share working either in space or in the space industry or in the bureaucracy related to space exploration. But for the time being, it would probably be laughed at if we suggested a space policy 101 course at a university emphasizing general education, not a space specific institution. So I'm going to present a way that space interested scholars can integrate space education, particularly on space policy or the social science of space, into university gen ed curriculums. So before I get to the case, just to highlight a couple things from the literature. So the first two sources on your screen are the primary two articles that I draw on in my work, and they both motivated me in creating the course that I teach. So the first one here is a piece by Lester Sade and Sade called Teaching Space Politics and Policy, an Overview and Evaluation of Student Attitudes. And they wrote in the journal Space Policy 1998, and they describe a political science course taught for a number of years at Colorado State University. I did follow up with the chair of political science there, and this course is no longer offered because they no longer have the expertise. But at the time, this paper emphasizes the course over 6 semesters, taught to an average of a pretty large class size, 40, 45 students per term. And it was a project of the Colorado Space Grant, which funded space activities and education at CSU from 1989 through at least the year 2000. So the article describes the course format, the readings, the assignments, the outcomes of the course. And the outcomes focus mostly on changes in student attitudes, such as growing support for manned exploration, funding increases, lunar or Martian bases or settlements. Interestingly, the course was designed with the explicit goal of increasing support for space exploration, and the authors conclude that the results do indeed suggest that a course of this type will enhance students' support for space exploration and ultimately the development of space. Although they do note that students develop some nuanced views of NASA's long-term goals. The other piece here by Ribaldi, who was an employee of the European Space Agency, but at the time writing in his personal capacity, to basically make the case that that a space policy course at the university level is necessary to foster space awareness and support in society. The course that Ribaldi envisions, and he's not reporting on, as far as I understand it, a course that was taught, but rather one that could be taught. He describes similar goals and content to the CSU course, briefly citing the Lester et al. Paper, but only in reference to the need for university education in space policy. Ultimately, he concludes that space activities being very political, we must muster the politics and help the policymakers to take the right decisions if humanity want to reap the benefits and undertake major new cooperative worldwide programs, such as the exploration of Mars. And back to one concluding statement from Lester and colleagues, they write, hopefully, more colleges and universities will recognize the importance of offering space, politics, and policy courses as we approach the 21st century. And they add, interestingly, and the possible discovery of extraterrestrial life. Now, the third source that I have here is a book by Jim Dator, who worked for the Department of Political Science at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and for about 30 years taught a course on governance design for a Mars settlement. Dator went on to lecture at the International Space University in Strasbourg, France, and authored this book based on his lectures there, which I might add is an excellent resource for students, and in the development of your own course. I use excerpts in my class. So as I noted earlier, the first two pieces here, only 6 citations in the literature, and one is Ribaldi citing Lester et al. So there's not a lot of academic discourse out there on the need for space policy education. I should also add really quick the work of Thomas Becker, who argues that it's a global imperative that we do educate the public at all levels. And he even addresses elementary and secondary education, so that, again, we can work towards becoming a spacefaring society. So let me turn to my course at the University of Dayton. So to give you some background, if you're not familiar with the university, that's a picture of our campus there, our chapel in the center of campus. In the building in the front on the right-hand side is actually St. Joe's Hall, where I'm sitting right now and where my department teaches. So the University of Dayton is a private Catholic research university in Dayton, Ohio. We were founded in 1850 by the Society of Mary, and we continue to be sponsored by, we call them the Marianists. UD enrolls over 11,000 full-time students across the College of Arts and Sciences and 4 professional schools, including a law school and a school of engineering. UD also houses the University of Dayton Research Institute, or UDRI, which is a top recipient of Department of Defense funding, particularly recognized for their materials research. We are located close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and many of our STEM faculty partner in their research with folks over at the base. So a few years back, the University of Dayton undertook a comprehensive revision of our approach to general education curriculum, resulting in the creation of what we call the Common Academic Program, or CAP. So justification for our approach to CAP is captured in this following excerpt. We live in a global society that is constantly changing. As tomorrow's leaders, UD students must understand its complexities and how to respond thoughtfully to its challenges and opportunities. The Common Academic Program introduces key questions and topics across a wide range of academic disciplines. Students will learn to value and synthesize diverse points of view and to examine issues critically, yet with an open mind. I should add that our approach to general education, one that is very interdisciplinary, is probably more similar to a liberal arts institution rather than a larger research university. So the approach to CAP, which is based in our Catholic Marianist heritage, takes a very interdisciplinary approach Students take courses across a variety of categories. One interesting one is actually called Crossing Boundaries. So there are categories of courses, and then there are required courses, like in their first year, students take COM 100, typical approach at a university. I think most interestingly, in terms of our social science education, we require students to not only take 2 introductory social science courses and 1 upper level course in one of those introductory disciplines, but also to take a special theme-based introduction to the social sciences in their sophomore year. So the course was created to be developmentally appropriate, not for introductory students like freshmen or upper level students, but to reach the sophomore. So students don't have to take it in their sophomore year, but they're highly encouraged to take it in their sophomore year. So this course, SSC 200, chooses a unique topic, and then the instructor, hailing from one of several social science departments, teaches about that topic from 3 disciplines, typically their own and then 2 others, while fulfilling 5 common course learning outcomes. So to get at my approach to this course, when I came to the university, they were just piloting SSC 200 as a course. I've been here since 2012. And when I came, the bulk of my work was in the area of urban policy and politics. And as I approached my tenure year and promotion to associate professor, I started to diversify my research portfolio and began doing space policy and politics work with my first publication in this area in 2015. So I taught SSC 200 on cities. The course was called Cities Are Past Our Future, and it attracted a high number of engineering students teaching about a very concrete topic, that is the built environment, but coming at it from political science, sociology, and economics. I got tired of teaching that after 5 years or so, and I wanted to explore something that was in line with much of my new research agenda. So I created a new course titled Space Exploration Toward a Spacefaring Society. So since fall of 2017, I've taught 8 sections of this course. The paper that this talk is based on uses data from 6 sections with 112 total students. And then for data analysis purposes, I exclude online summer offerings and focus only on the 89 students who took the course during 3 fall semesters. So I have both face-to-face and online versions of this course. The online versions began as summer only. I was actually enrolled in a program called E-Learning Fellows, or ELF, during the spring 2020 term, when we all know, the pandemic hit and we had to convert many of our courses to online learning. So it was most advantageous that I was in an e-learning cohort where I was actually working to convert my space exploration course into an exemplary online course that could be taken asynchronously by students at the University of Dayton. And I'm actually teaching it now for the first time during a regular term, fully online. I have 30 students going through the course right now. Looking at the data on those 89 students, 2/3 are STEM majors in the natural and physical sciences and the variety of engineering fields. And most of the other 1/3 are actually business majors, management, marketing, finance, etc. So to just tell you a little bit about the content of the course before we jump into assessment, I teach this course from 3 disciplines: political science, sociology, and economics. So students sign up, again, largely from STEM majors, and they sign up to study a topic that they think is a topic associated with their fields, whether they are majoring in astrophysics or aerospace engineering. They come to the class thinking of space as a science and technology topic. So I have the task of introducing them to a new way of seeing space exploration from a social science perspective. So the course is organized around 6 content modules that you see here. An introduction to the social science of space, and then 2 modules that hone in on 2 sets of the disciplines for the course. First one focusing on space politics and policy, and the second focusing on astrosociology and space economics. There with a focus on the motivations and the benefits of space exploration. And then I do 2 special topics modules. The first one primarily focused around issues of international cooperation and conflict. And the second on the potential discovery of extraterrestrial life, including the implications across a variety of human institutions, social, political, and religious, bringing in some of my own work. And then finally, the concluding module asks the questions, where do we go from here? How do we build long-term constituencies that will support our future as a spacefaring civilization? So just to show you very briefly, from the online version, I don't actually have any pictures of my students sitting around in the classroom in this particular course, but I do have some quick screen captures of the online version. Here's the module for the intro to the social science of space, where I try and make a quick case for space as a social science issue. So students read an introduction, watch a video, and then go through a set of tasks. And then quickly, I'll show you a second module on space politics and policy. I do use a little excerpt from the science communicator and astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson before we convert over to almost exclusively reading peer-reviewed articles and the occasional chapter from an academic book. So from that second module, here's an example of what students read. So there's a timeline of spaceflight from space.com, a short excerpt from Tyson's Space Chronicles, one of the chapters from Sade's Space Politics and Policy book outlining his evolutionary perspective on space politics, and then some readings on space law, whether there's an issue public for space policy, and then how policymakers respond to public opinion on space exploration. So the work products quickly, each module students will do forum posts and responses if online. If in person, they do what I call reading responses. These are mostly to get them reading and engaging with the content of the readings. Every module includes a short assignment. Some relate to a larger project, the Policy Brief project, where they identify a space policy problem. They research the solutions using peer-reviewed literature and then communicate the findings and recommendations. Other short assignments that give them a break from that project include a film critique, where they watch a sci-fi or a nonfiction film related to space exploration, and they analyze it from the perspective of 2 of the course disciplines. And then there's a group project where they are given possible scenarios related to the discovery of extraterrestrial life, and then they figure out what type of response they might give, choosing a different human institution, such as the United Nations or a major religious tradition. And then they do a final exam, which is all essay-based. So to look at the assessment of this course, upon completion of the SSC 200 course, students have to demonstrate these 5 learning outcomes. And to quickly summarize them, number 1 is locating peer-reviewed articles in the social sciences. Number 2 is utilizing these peer-reviewed articles for academic inquiry. Third is building knowledge of social science research methods. Fourth is building knowledge of how different social theories, and then it's quite wordy, but I like this, facilitate the critical and imaginative evaluation of the ethical, historical, social, political, technological, economic, or ecological challenges of the times. And that you might think that's worded interestingly. It's rooted in how the Marianists think about the issues facing our world. And then the 5th learning outcome is knowledge of how context, difference, or positionality shape social issues and the power to shape social issues. We call this our diversity outcome. So here's the framework for how we assess this course and how I, in particular, assess the course using a variety of assessment tools. So I mentioned that we do a policy brief with analysis and proposed solution of a problem facing the future of human space exploration. Students have to locate a minimum number of relevant peer-reviewed articles on their problem and its solutions. So we rate them as proficient if they're able to do that, or absent if they're not. Across the remaining 4 course learning outcomes, they can be rated across exemplary, proficient, developing, insufficient, or absent. So the students have to use those peer-reviewed articles to craft their policy brief. And then the final 3 are assessed at the end of the course with final exam essays, asking students to analyze and critically analyze social science methods in a primary study related to space exploration, to analyze a social science theory from an introductory reading and how it influences a higher level reading in the same discipline. And then finally, I asked students to explain why space exploration is largely an activity of developed nations, and they have to propose ways that developing countries can become more active participants in space exploration. So I'm just going to show you some quick summary data on the outcomes for my space course versus all the other courses. This is not to demonstrate my teaching prowess at all, but rather to highlight that the space topic can be effective at achieving general learning outcomes of interest to universities. So all of these have been assessed across those 5-point scales with the exception of the first. I've converted these to 3-point scales, basically collapsing exemplary and proficient into the same high, the score of 3 category, so that if instructors have a tendency to overinflate, hopefully this corrects a little bit. And it's not, this process is not without peril. When we ask a variety of instructors to assess a variety of different courses using a variety of different assessment tools. But we do it every term, and it gives me a point of comparison for my space course and all the other sections. So if you look, my scores are comparable and at sometimes numerically higher across the various course learning outcomes of interest. The final course learning outcome related to diversity is actually significantly different at the 0.05 level. So my score in that case is numerically higher, using a topic that most would not associate directly with issues of diversity. And many of the other topics taught by other faculty are explicitly about diversity in different ways. Then another way of looking at this class is to look at the student evaluation scores for the course. When I compare the 3 of 8 questions, which are scored across a Likert scale, when I compare them to all sections, you'll see that the space course is typically rated above. I cannot do here any statistical significance tests because unlike the course outcomes, I can't work my way back to the individual scores. Here, I'm just given the mean for all other sections. I exclude the questions that are specifically about the instructor here, but rather trying to get at maybe what makes the space theme unique. So just looking at some quick comments that students have had about this course. So students have asked for more courses involving space. They've asked that this course continue, or that even I teach, maybe another course on space exploration. Students have recommended that others take it or commented it was one of their favorite classes. The online version, a student commented that it was the best designed online course they've taken at the university. And I don't say that to brag. I give that credit fully to the e-learning fellows, coaches who taught me how to teach online. And then I like this last comment here. This class was probably my favorite all semester, and it doesn't really have anything to do with my major. I had a lot of fun, and I feel like I learned a ton. So to conclude, I think that social science faculty should consider ways of adding space policy or social science of space courses to the higher ed curricula, as I and others have done. But I think if possible, we should think about not only offering these courses within departments or space-oriented research centers, or courses that are upper-level electives in a single discipline like political science, but rather finding ways that we can reach a broader selection of undergraduate students with courses on space policy. As I noted earlier, 2/3 of my students are STEM majors, various engineering fields, computer science, biology, natural sciences, and the remaining 1/3 are mostly business majors. That means to me that that many of these students, when they look at a course like SSE 200 that is thematic based on different special topics, they gravitate towards the topics that they seemingly think are associated with their fields of interest. And we have the opportunity to help them understand, like I began with Genta and Rycroft, arguing that our future in space is not solely due to scientific and technological advances, but to social, political, and economic developments. So, in conclusion, imagine the impact that our STEM and business majors could have in the space field if they also carry with them a better understanding of the social, political, and economic forces shaping our spacefaring future. Now, to conclude, I added really quick a bonus slide because I loved in Carl Starr's keynote this morning, and if you weren't here for that or you're unfamiliar, Carl is the mission operator for the James Webb Space Telescope, and he highlighted what space professionals and educators can focus on as they train and equip and mentor the next generation of space professionals. And he had 5 points. The 3 are outside my area of expertise. He said, encourage students to study a field relevant to space, to help them understand telemetry and programming and some of these concrete technical skills. But the latter 2 points are exactly what my course offers to students at the University of Dayton. He noted understanding space history, which provides an extra dimension appreciated within NASA and the military, as not essential, but as a great complement to some of that technical understanding. And then finally, communication skills that are essential. He says fresh graduates often cannot communicate effectively or efficiently. And in my class, this is a key takeaway for students. Outside of achieving those CAP learning outcomes, this course, and quite frankly, all my courses, emphasize how students can synthesize a lot of complex information, in this case from peer-reviewed literature, and then ultimately communicate in a succinct, brief, clear, front-loaded manner with their audience, whether it's internal supervisor, decision-making body, interested public, etc. And Carl emphasized students need to be able to put on one slide in a presentation a problem, its impacts, and its solution. And that universities tend to train students to communicate with as much content as possible, but ignoring the quality of that communication and the ability to really get across the point. So thank you. Thank you, Rob, for moderating. Thank you to whatever audience we have. I'm happy if anybody after this panel or conference wants to communicate with me by email. I'm happy to send the paper this is based on, any details on my course if you're working on your own such course, or any of my work, published work on what I call the separation of church and space. So I will stop sharing and turn this back over to Rob.
Joshua, Dr. Ambrosius, thank you very much. Please feel free to post any questions you might have in the Q&A. I think we have 7 participants total. I did have one question that I posted, someone who very frequently intersects the nexus between STEM and humanities. So my question is, as someone who teaches in both the humanities and STEM, what do you see as the most fruitful assessments that can promote high performance in each? For example, to assist students in quote unquote relearning math as tested according to Common Core, I use ESL techniques to help students better understand the terms used, ways of grouping math data, et cetera. And usually using ESL techniques, they go, oh, that's what the question's asking, duh, and they can answer it. So kids who could score above a 700 math SAT, but they don't, then realize, oh, okay, I could do this, or GRE. I've taught a lot of ESL, German 2, undergraduate Spanish 2. So linguistics is my background, and math also. So what do you see as the most fruitful assessments that can promote high performance in each?
Yeah, and I think, so it looks like you posted that question at 2:11. And after that, I had those 2 slides that I just sort of tacked on to the end from Carl Starr's talk. I think that gets at how I would answer this, that while you're talking about math performance, I think that communication, writing skills are key. And I think the ability to critically synthesize a large amount of information and then communicate that in a way that is understandable, that is clear, that emphasizes the key takeaways. I think that's something that students could utilize in their other courses, say students who are STEM students, or utilize when they get out there in the workplace. I actually had one student when I was teaching them how I wanted them to write their policy brief or to write a memo or a policy report. I tell them, headings and subheadings are great. They help guide the reader. But even better than putting introduction, background, findings, analysis, are to include substantive headings that capture the key conclusion from that particular section. And one of my students who worked for a number of years for a local city council, he said, "Nobody writes this way. What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, you're going to write this way, and your supervisor and the council and the public is going to love it when they can understand exactly what you are trying to communicate. And it's of benefit to you because you want to get across your point. You want to show your value. So I'd say, I don't know if that fully addresses your question, but I think assessing these communication skills is key on top of whatever disciplinary assessments that you do, maybe related to the topic of the course, as well as in my case, essentially university imposed assessments related to these common academic program outcomes, which I think are all great as well. I think there's some challenges with doing universal assessment across the thematic course taught by different instructors on different topics using different assessment tools, and then drawing any kind of macro universal conclusions about the course approach. But I think they're all admirable outcomes. I think being able to find and utilize peer-reviewed literature as well as understanding methods, theory, and diversity are all the types of things that we should be doing via our general education curriculum for all students at our university.
That's great. Thank you very much, Joshua, for your response. I like the holistic, transcendental approach, that there's skill sets that are applicable across the board. And if you're missing some of the skill sets, it'll show in multiple disciplines. So if you work on the skill sets, you'll improve in analytical and verbal at the same time. So other questions. We have kind of a quiet group here, but please post in the question and answer. We probably have enough time. We have about 12 more minutes. If you want to pop on camera, you're free to do that as well. We can be a bit more informal, but any other questions out there in the audience?
And I'll throw a question into the chat asking, is there anyone who's here listening who teaches a space course or is thinking about teaching a space course? Or do you have any questions about creating such a course or about reaching students with the topic? And while we wait to see if anybody has some questions on that or anything else, I will note that I think any course on space is greatly appreciated. No matter your field. I'm focusing on social science and general education. And while I do argue that, I think a gen ed class can reach a broader audience than a specific discipline class, I wouldn't be opposed to anybody teaching on space at any level. I think it's great. But my point there is that if I said I want to teach a class on space policy, so I'm going to offer it in the Department of Political Science as a POL 300 level course. Who's going to take that course? It's going to be mostly political science majors who get credit for that upper level course in their major, and maybe some students who have space in their schedule. I can guarantee I wouldn't have anywhere near the number of STEM students because they often don't in their programs have as much leeway to go around the university taking other courses that don't check boxes, right? at our university, you can get disciplinary courses approved to count as CAP courses in other categories, but it's a process you go through. And then you might get students from outside, but if you can find a way to take the topic and squeeze it into something like this thematic course that we offer at the University of Dayton, it allows the course to do one of those points that Carl Starr mentioned, and that is give students a broad understanding of the history and context of space exploration, that can complement, their technical coursework that they're taking. They could graduate with an aerospace engineering degree. Many of my students do. But a course like this gives them some more context on governance and the industry that they might find themselves in. So we have no other questions at the moment.
Any other questions from the audience? I think everyone might be like on their Friday afternoon lull internet conference on Zoom.
And I must add that that I was scheduled up against two
we can end a
of
little bit early
what I thought were the best.
I wanted.
Was having a little delay on your camera and audio, Rob, but I'm saying in looking at the schedule, we were scheduled up against two of what I think are the best topical panels. So I hope I can maybe go back and check those out in the recordings. So with that, Rob, shall we conclude?
We can conclude. I mean, I can ask many questions, but yeah, I'll save the audience from those types of greater metaphysical questions. I had a question about Buddhism and the influence of religious studies on reshaping the paradigms with which we think of, space studies, how that would fall more in I guess, a philosophy of science domain, but that's a much greater question to ask. I'll just leave that for a future. There's one question that gave me says, "This was great. I don't teach in space policy, but I found your comments and ideas transferable to my field too. Thank you for this, Kelly Rice." Kelly, thank you very much. We got that response from her.
Thank you, Kelly.
And I'll save my Siddhartha question for later.
Something quick that's interesting. I utilize a book by Eugene Bardak, which he's a public policy scholar that lays out what he calls the eightfold path for public policy analysis. And we actually he doesn't use any direct references to Buddhism other than this language of the eightfold path. But I actually highlight a number of connections for my students. In particular, I noted here that I talk a lot about unlearning, bad habits, which is a piece of the eightfold path. So Buddhism does come into play, not directly, but how I teach about policy analysis and communication. So Rob is frozen on my screen. Can you hear me, Rob?
Am I still frozen?
You're unfroze.
I'm unfroze. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, we should probably conclude, because the Buddhism question might take another 90 minutes. We got for a beer afterwards if this is like in person, but and talk about Siddhartha. But any other questions? Dr. Ambrosius, thank you very, very much. I learned a lot. I'm sure that the audience did too. It's tough on a Friday afternoon, I know, but yeah, very enlightening for me. So thank you very much. Not to use a Buddhist pun, but I guess I just did.
All right. Well, thanks, Rob, for sitting in as the moderator. And as I noted, you know, if anybody has any follow-ups they don't want to put in the chat here, but want to reach out, feel free to email me at my University of Dayton email address. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burgess. Thank you.